But what happened was when I quit in early March of 2020, so right before COVID became a thing, literally 2 or 3 weeks after I leave my job, my wife, she gets a phone call on April 1st from her employer saying, unfortunately, we have to downsize a little bit because COVID's really hit us hard, and we're going to have to let you go.
Oh,
So,
wow. Welcome to the Golden Nuggets of Real Estate Investing, a podcast dedicated to helping you achieve financial freedom through real estate. We'll be discussing the most important lessons, or better known as the Golden Nuggets of Real Estate Investing, entrepreneurship, and personal finance with new and experienced investors to help you get into real estate investing or scale up your portfolio. So make sure to tune in. What's going on, everyone? It's Ross Nadai. I'm a real estate agent, an investor, and host of the Real Estate Golden Nuggets podcast. I have an amazing episode full of golden nuggets for you. If you like this podcast and gotten any value out of it, please share this far and wide to reach as many people as possible. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave me a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, leave me a comment, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you can stay up to date on the most recent episodes. Thank you so much for your support. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Golden Nuggets of Real Estate Investing podcast. I'm your host, Ross, and today I'm joined by my special guest, Scott Zandbergen, who is a real estate investor who was primarily investing in the Niagara region, and now he has moved on to Belleville primarily right now, but it doesn't stop him there. He's looking for the biggest opportunities out there in the market, and he's taking advantage of it, which I absolutely love and I want to explore today. So without further ado, please, Scott, tell us a little bit about your journey and what are you up to so far?
first of all, thanks for having me on, Ross. I think it's awesome that you've got a podcast now. I'm excited to be one of the first 10 or so guests. So congrats on that. So for me, so I've been an investor since 2014. So not that long. I guess it's been about 7 years now that I've been, buying real estate and setting up rental properties. And, I started in 2014 as more of a casual investor, just looking for a place to park my own money to see some better growth than I was seeing when I had my money parked in stocks and mutual funds and things like that. So I bought some single family homes and rented them out and kind of just let them sit and didn't manage them too actively, didn't really think too much about it. Except when a few years had gone by and I started to see the value of those properties really start to take off, keeping in mind that there was really no cash flow for the time that I owned those properties. The rent payments basically covered the cost of ownership of the property, so the tax, the mortgage, the tax, and the insurance. So not really a lot of buffer at the end of the day. But boy, oh boy, after a few years, equity growth was incredible, and then when the mortgages came up for renewal at about the 5-year mark,
right,
that's when you're kind of faced with the decision of, should I renew these or should I just take my chips off the table here, right? So sold them, and I'm glad I did, because the market was booming then. That was around 20. I guess I sold my first one around 2017, 2018. I can't remember anymore. And then but kind of before all that happened, just before I started selling, I started looking into other investment strategies. My interest continued to evolve in real estate, right, even though those first few I just kind of didn't do a lot with. But I started poking around more. I started going to more real estate networking events, meeting more people, and started hearing more people talking about converting single families to duplexes. And so I decided I wanted to start doing that too. So I started dabbling in that a little bit, and that was right around the same time when those other properties were coming up for mortgage renewal, and then sold them and then redeployed that capital
right
into doing some duplexing. And so and after that I was just kind of hooked, right? Once I saw what you could do with taking a single family property, turning it into 2 units, and essentially doubling your cash flow,
right,
mitigating your risk. I was hooked right away, right? And so once I did a couple of those, I was like, this is what I'm going to do for now, right? And so I've been on that track now since about, I always forget now. I think my first duplex conversion was late 2017. And I've done several of them since then. And I'm doing more as we speak, because I continue to believe that it's a good model. Like I said, it mitigates risk. You get good cash flow. As long as you're in good markets, you can attract decent tenants. It's a good strategy. And it got me to the point where I was able to replace a significant portion of my income, my day job income, with cash flow. And got to the point where I basically retired from my job in early 2020. So.
Yeah, and that's phenomenal. And by the way, so your investments when you started journey, was it primarily in Niagara and the Welland region?
So when I started back in 2014, no, I was actually investing on the east side of Toronto. I was way out in Bowmanville. So that's east of Oshawa, right? So
right.
That's where I had some single family homes. And I only started there because at the time I was living just east of downtown Toronto. And when I decided I wanted to start doing some real estate investing, I was doing my research phase in 2013. I just started like kind of casting the net, like where should I look, right? And clearly it didn't make sense for me to buy something in Toronto proper. So I started going a little further out, started looking in Oshawa, started looking in Whitby, and then got to push it out further and further, and then eventually landed on Bowmanville. Now, like just to understand the numbers, like I think the first couple of properties I bought in Bowmanville were about $310,000 each, for just a detached three bedroom house, 2-bathroom house kind of thing, $300,000. But it was renting at the time for about $1,800, right? So. Yeah, so that like for the whole house, right? So that's why you can see by the time you put your mortgage and the mortgage rates a few years ago were maybe 3.5%, something like that we were paying. So the mortgages were a little bit higher. So the point is there wasn't a lot of cash flow, but at the time I wasn't solving for cash flow at all, right? I just bought those houses as a way to I wanted to put my money in a safe place, right? And I was really attracted to the physical asset, the bricks and mortar, a chunk of land. And it was more of a buy and hold strategy. So,
wow, that's interesting. Yeah, because I didn't even know Bowmanville until maybe 2 years ago. I never heard of it. I was like, where is that?
Nice little bedroom community. I mean, I'll tell you, it has boomed in the last even couple years. I mean, if I would have held those single family homes 2 or 3 more years, like they probably had gone up another 200,000 a pop, I think.
For sure.
Just crazy. Yeah, crazy. But it's a good little bedroom community. The 407 extension really helped raise the values. They have there's a new GO train station that was opening up in the area. So a lot of the fundamentals were strong, which is why I was initially attracted to that market. And then what happened with my personal situation is that I changed jobs in 2015. And so when I changed jobs, I started working in Mississauga, and it was only a matter of time before I realized the commute from downtown Toronto to Mississauga was starting to suck. So I convinced my family we should move closer to Mississauga somewhere. So we actually landed in Georgetown. And so living in Georgetown, starting this new job, I was kind of focused on the new job for a while. So it took my eye off of the real estate investing scene for a little bit as I was kind of getting hunkered down to my new job and getting settled in there. But within a year or so, I started kind of like coming up for air and having a look around, like where should I start investing again, and got involved in some of the local meetup groups out on the west side of the city. So Hamilton, like the Right Club and Greater Hamilton REI meetup group. There was a couple others. And then it just became kind of an obvious thing that I needed to start investing in Hamilton, right? Because like Georgetown to Hamilton's 45 minutes or whatever. So I started looking there and did a couple investments in Hamilton. And then I just kind of, from there, I started to spill out into the Niagara region. And then really focused there for a couple of years as well. So.
Yeah. So basically, just to recap what you said, so was your main criteria when you're looking at these, like, or I should say outside of GTA, what was the main reason you were looking at those specific regions? Was it what attracted you? Was it the cash flow? Was it, you saw the market fundamentals, like, near university or GO train, like you mentioned, Bowmanville, for example, had that, right? What were some of the fundamentals you were looking for?
Well, certainly certainly when my mindset started to shift to becoming way more active and trying to grow my portfolio, like I certainly at that point was thinking about cash flow, right? So then I started to kind of set objectives for myself around I do want to start replacing my day job income with real estate investing cash flow. So that pushed me into markets where I knew I could make decent cash flow, but I wasn't going out so far, you know, because I mean, obviously, the smaller the market, you can usually do okay with cash flow because the property values are a bit lower, and you know, as long as the rents are still decent, you can make some decent cash flow. I was trying to strike a balance. Like that's why I liked Hamilton a lot, because Hamilton is, you know, very much part of the GTA or the GTHA or whatever you call it. So Hamilton was lots of obviously strong fundamentals, good jobs, you know, not too hard to find really good tenants in Hamilton. But when I started going beyond Hamilton, I still remember I was working with a realtor who, you know, helped me buy, I think 2 right off the bat in Hamilton. And then we were looking for another one. And then she said, well, why don't you come out to St. Catharines? So I went out on a Saturday to St. Catharines, looked at 2 or 3 properties, and one of them I was pretty interested in and was going to make an offer. But on that trip to St. Catharines, we showed up and walked through a couple properties. She said, "Oh, there's one more I want you to see, and it's in Welland." So I'm like, "Oh, yeah, where's Welland?" Right? So we're already out way out in St. Catharines here. I drove like 30 minutes from Hamilton to get to St. Catharines, and she's like, "It's like another 20 minutes down the 406." Right? I'm like, "Okay, well, let's go to Welland." So we go to Welland, and we go into this nice neighborhood, and the neighborhood's called Chippewa Park, and just fell in love with this property. Right? It was a nice 1961 or so all brick bungalow, and it was about 1,400 square feet on the main level. It had a nice addition on the back, which is how it got to about 1,400 feet, because a lot of the bungalows are 1,100. But this had a nice addition on the back, which was kind of set up as a separate family room in a way.
Right.
But so saw that the main floor was pretty nice. And then we went in the basement of this place, and the basement was untouched, like just perfection. And the ceilings were high, right? Like the ceilings must have been, I don't know, almost 8 feet. They were 7.5 feet or something like that. So, and it was untouched, right? So it's always amazing when you walk into a new house and the basement's untouched, and you know, you think about this house has been sitting around for what, 60 years it's been lived in, and no one ever finished the basement. You could see the floor joists, you could see all the walls exposed. So, which is great, because then you know if there's any water damage, if there's any mold, like nothing's hiding behind the walls. You see everything. But most importantly, you see the ceiling height, right? You see where the posts are, and you know, is this going to work for a suite? Anyways.
Okay, what was the price for that?
I think it was $349. It was $349 the day before. We were there on a Saturday, hit the market on the Friday. We were there one day after it hit the market. So anyways, I loved it. Like it had a deep lot, like 125 deep or something like that. It's about a 50 wide, 50, maybe even 60-foot wide lot. So on the drive home, call up the realtor. And I'm like, I think this is a good one. It checks the boxes.
Right.
I don't know much about Welland, so I'm taking your advice on this.
Yeah.
If you think Welland's a decent market, I'm willing to roll the dice. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? I'm going to own a house in Welland. Big deal, right? I can always sell it. So we put an offer in while we were driving. We agreed, let's just throw an offer in at 345, and we'll make it. This is back when you could put conditions on your offers. This was probably 2018. So we did a home inspection condition. No, I can't remember if I did a financing one or not. I don't think so. I think I did a home inspection condition. And so that was probably one of the last houses, by the way, that I did a home inspection on. But anyways, did a home inspection condition that it passed with flying colors. But what I did is at the home inspection, like a few days later, I had the home inspector meet me there, but I also had the contractor meet me there. And that's when I had the contractor walk through with me and just, you know, yes, this is going to be great for a suite, has a nice, you know, side or back door entrance. ceiling heights are great. Yes, we're gonna have to do some work on the electrical, blah, blah, blah. And, within a couple hours, I had a quote on what it was gonna cost to do a suite and all that, right? Anyway, so we just did it, and had that place up and running in about 4 or 5 months, completely done, rented, and then I just started looking for more. so
Yeah.
so I bought like 5 more, and like over the course of the next I don't know, 9-12 months, something like that.
Wow.
All in the same kind of pocket, all in that same neighborhood for the most part.
Yeah. So that turned out to be like a gold mine then for you. You saw the return on it, and you started implementing and getting more on the same region. So it was a good deal.
I loved it. I mean, and I guess you know how it is, right? The more time you start to spend in a market, in a neighborhood, you start to know the streets a little bit.
That's right.
You start to get a feel for the property values, because at first you're kind of like, I don't know if this is worth 350. I have no idea what's comparable, right? Realtor shows you some stuff. You're like, all right, I guess. But then the more research you start doing yourself, you feel your confidence starts to go up, right?
For
and
sure.
then like the next several I bought sight unseen, by the way. The realtor called me up from a property similar to the one we bought. Maybe she'll FaceTime me or something like that,
Right.
and say, hey, this would hit the market. It's very similar to the one you just bought. What do you think? I'm like, do it up, write up an offer, right? And so we managed to get a few done that way. And so it was just like, at that point, it was just like, let's follow the formula, right? It was working.
Yeah.
I was in the meantime, I was learning how best to attract tenants.
Mm-hmm.
The Welland market was definitely different than the Hamilton market for finding tenants, but it just took a little bit more patience, a little bit more screening, and I was finding tenants that were great, and it was working out just fine.
Yeah. Awesome. So let's touch upon a little bit about how you're able to do the renovation. So I know, especially when you're doing conversion, you have to go through the city, right? So can you just walk us through what does that typically look like? You obviously need a contractor, but there's permits, drawings, and all sorts of other areas that need to also focus on.
Yeah. So the first thing that we do is so when we go into the property, generally I like to have my contractor come with me when I'm looking at a property. If I can have the contractor with me when I'm going to make an offer, that's the best scenario, right?
Right.
My contractor is kind of like the home inspection for me, right? Like, let's just look at this together. Let's check out some of the fundamentals or the mechanicals in good shape. Yeah. So once we're at the point where we know that, okay, this is going to be a good property, we get the offer done, we get it accepted. The next thing that I'm trying to do is, let's say we close in 30 days. Okay, so obviously now I'm scrambling to make sure I got my financing figured out and I can close on this thing. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, you always get like 3 walkthroughs or something like that you write into your offer, right? So you can have walkthroughs prior to closing. So I always try to use 1 or 2 of those walkthroughs to plan out the next steps, right? So that's when I'll bring in the designer. So like a BCIN designer comes in with us and takes all the measurements. We get their opinion on how best can we lay this place out. I want to get 3 bedrooms in the basement. And so within, I want to say, a couple of weeks of having that initial consult with the designer, when they get their measurements, then we start getting some floor plans coming out, and we kind of iterate based on what we see, what we like. Once we don't like the size of the bathroom, let's try this. Let's put the bedroom there, whatever, right? We see 2 or 3 options. And then ideally, if you've got the time for it, you try to get that submitted into the city before your closing date, so that you can get your permits right around when the property closes. So I think maybe twice we actually were successful with that timing, where on closing date, permits were ready. The only thing that was required from the city was we had to give them the final title report from the lawyer to the city to show that, yes, this property is now in my name, so therefore they could actually issue the permit.
Right.
But it was within 1 day or so of closing, permits in hand, demolitions beginning, right? So off to the races, and then we have contractors in there. They've already got all the floor plans ready to go. We've got our permit, and we're just banging out walls and starting, right? So that, like, when it happens that way, it's perfection. That's when I was gonna say, the ducks are it doesn't always happen this way. I can tell you lots of examples that haven't happened that way, but we did have a few like that. They were just like, it was just perfection, right? And I think the fastest we got it turned around was probably maybe just over 3 months, maybe just under, somewhere between 3 and 4 months, let's say, that we had the unit completely done, ready to rent. That would have been one of the more straightforward projects where we didn't really do much to the upper level. The upper level was kind of turnkey. We focused mostly on building out the basement and get the occupancy permit at the end of the process. I generally start advertising to show it to tenants while the renovation's going on. I mean, the contractors always hate that because I'm there walking through with tenants and they're like, blaring their music and hanging drywall, and I'm actually showing it to tenants that I'm setting their expectation. I'm going to show you this place. It's not ready yet, but there's going to be a lot of demand for it. So I'm giving you a shot at this now. And in some cases, it's down to the wire, right? Like we got the contractors finishing up, doing the final finishing touches on the property. I got a cleaner coming in, ducts are being cleaned, and tenants are moving in like that afternoon, kind of thing. Wow. So sometimes it was just so tightly coordinated where it just worked amazingly well, but it's not always like that. That's the utopian state. Yeah.
That's incredible. Yeah. So the permits that you do take and you, what does that roughly cost? I mean, first of all, you mentioned when you get these properties, did you go for the ones that already had like a walkout basement door, or did you create the basement door? Okay, I know that's a big cost usually there. And then secondly, I know once you pass the inspection and everything, what are we, generally speaking, let's just assume obviously labor costs and everything has gone up off the roof, but when you were doing these properties conversions, what were you looking at in terms of a conversion, in terms of pricing? How much did it cost you to do that?
Yep. So to start with on the designs and permits. So in the city of Welland, the permits are not that expensive. I'm trying to remember now. It's under $1,000, maybe $900, $800, something like that to get the permit. The designer, depending on the BCIN designers are, the lowest I paid was maybe $2,200 to get the whole set of drawings done. The most I paid was probably $3,600. Okay. So it all just depends on the experience level and how good they are, right? So there are some designers I worked with multiple times and do great work. Others that maybe didn't do as great work. But anyways, that's a whole separate conversation. Yeah. But so budget, let's say $3,000 in that range, right? For your drawings, maybe another $1,000 for permits. The actual project itself, it can range quite a bit because it depends on how much you are going to do. Now, you can go the simplistic route. You can buy a property and slam in a bedroom in the basement or two bedrooms in the basement. A lot of times you'll buy a property and it's already got a ceiling in the basement, like it's already drywalled. Maybe there's an old kitchen that's already there. So you can kind of like retool things a little bit and try to, salvage what's there and do it on a shoestring budget. I haven't done any like that though. So mine have all been, every single one of my duplex conversions has been a full gut to the studs in the basement. Okay. So, not upstairs. We're just talking the basement, right? So we rip out what's there. Now, sometimes like I said earlier, sometimes we've been lucky. We've bought a house that is completely empty in the basement already. That's super easy. No demo cost then. Other times it's a fully finished basement, ceilings in, there's rooms, whatever. There's a bathroom. We tend to rip it all out. Now the bathroom, if it's already plumbed, that's good. Hopefully we can use that same spot for the bathroom. But for me, I really want to do it right. Like I'm trying to create a premium product that is a brand new modern apartment down there, right? So it's a 3-bedroom, nice size windows. It's safe. We do egress windows. There's interconnected smoke detectors. There's all the fire separation. So we do all the stuff the right way. But most importantly, I really care about what's a tenant going to think when they first walk through, or a prospect, I should say, when they first walk through. Like it's going to be a brand new kitchen. We're going to have nice pot lights. We're going to have stainless steel appliances. We're going to have stackable full-size laundry in a nice little closet. And I can't tell you how many times I've walked a prospect tenant through and they're just like, this is the best place I've seen, right? Because you have to realize that you're competing a lot of times with people that have, crappy in-law suites that they try to, use a shoestring budget and get it by, or you're competing with somebody. Maybe you're competing with somebody that's looking at a 2-bedroom apartment in a building, like they're in an eightplex or something, right?
That's right. That's right.
And so they're coming out of that environment and they're like sick of standing waiting for the elevator and it's tight and all that stuff, right? And dingy hallways. And they see this and they're like, okay, so it's a basement, but when I come out of the basement, I come up one flight of stairs, I'm on the driveway, or I'm in the backyard, right? There's green space. My car's right there. I don't have to walk for 5 minutes down hallways and bump into people I don't want to talk to and all that stuff, right?
Right.
So people are just like, they love it. Like they really love the product that we're creating. We're not doing high-end finishes. We're doing simple, mid-grade IKEA kitchen, for example. We're doing, fairly modest stainless steel appliances, vinyl plank flooring, laminate countertop. So we're not doing quartz.
Right.
For now, maybe eventually we will. But everything looks good. Everything looks new. It's freshly painted. The trim is nice. The doors are nice. Everything works, right?
Yeah.
So people really like that. And so, so kind of getting back to, I guess this is a long-winded way of getting to the numbers. I would say the least I have paid, the least I paid for a basement conversion was $75,000. That was in 2017 though.
Right.
In 2018, 2019, I paid between $90K, and I think the most I paid was about 140.
Wow.
And that, but it depends on. So when I was at the 140 range, that's when there's a few extra things in there that you're now looking at. By the way, that's inclusive of HST and all that, right?
Yeah.
So at the upper end, you're now talking about. You need to do some work to the main floor, for example. So, because the main floor sometimes has, the 1968 grandma kitchen in it, and it's got to go, right? So we rip that out at the same time. And it's got a bathtub that's blue and a toilet that's pink and stuff like that. It's just ugly. So if we're going to have the contractors there doing the basement, I'm going to spend the extra $25K or whatever it's going to take to do the main floor at the same time. I would say half of the time on the main floor, we redo the floors. So if you're walking over those floors and it's all that original, like hardwood, like oak flooring, and it's squeaky, and it's a little bit beat up, what we will generally try to do in those cases is put about 1,000 screws on the floor to tighten up the squeaks as best we can.
Right.
And then put vinyl plank right over top. Right. So now it's got a nice new vinyl floor.
Yeah.
We at the same time are usually putting some pot lights into the main living areas of the main floor to really brighten it up. New kitchen. Sometimes we just paint the kitchen depending on what the quality of the cabinets are like.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's all those extra things that starts to make that budget creep up, right?
Yeah.
So not uncommon to get to that range. And then you're like, oh, I forgot about the driveway, right? And the driveway's not wide enough. There's another $3,000 to widen the driveway or whatever, right? There's just little things like that come along.
Correct.
Yeah. So don't be shocked when you have to kind of budget those kinds of numbers to do a really nice job, I would say. Right. I know other investors that regularly say, no, I'm in the 180 range now for a proper duplex conversion. I've never been up to that high.
Yeah.
But I can see why you would be, because if you got to do furnace and AC, well, there's another $5K gone, right? Sometimes you got to run all new duct work, right? That's $2,000 or $3,000. Like,
right.
It can add up. So
another thing I was going to say is the electrical, right? I'm sure when you do the conversions, you want to put a separate meters in there, right? So that's another cost that a lot of people don't really consider. And you would want to do it. If you're going to go through all that hassle, might as well separate it so you can have plus utilities included in your monthly. And I love that you are going kind of like, let's not the ultimate luxury life, but you're going for you're targeting the right tenants, right? So you're back to your point, what you're saying is when you produce a good product, you're generally going to attract the right tenant profile, right? It goes like anything. If the quality of the finish is not great, there's no way someone's going to pay a premium price for that place. So that sounds like that's been working really well for you there, right?
Yeah, and not being afraid to charge the premium level rent, right? I mean, yeah, you'll get the haters for sure.
Yeah.
That think you're trying to gouge, and you're the problem with society today, you scum landlords. You get that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't. You have to have a bit of a thick skin for that. I know when you post your ads, and I generally put mine on Marketplace and all that.
Right.
I stopped putting my ads in the Facebook groups, because you can, when you put your ad on Marketplace, you can also say share it to these 3 or 4. Like Welland's got its own like buy and sell. There's probably like 6 or 7 of them. Yeah. I did that a few times, but man, the comments, people are just like bashing you. I'm like, that's not worth my time, man. So I just stopped doing that. I just stopped putting them in those groups and just put it on Marketplace. I get plenty of leads off there, and I'm not afraid to charge a premium rent. And I always do plus all utilities. Mm-hmm. And so as people apply, they know what they're getting in for. They know it must be a nice place if I'm charging a little bit more than maybe the average place might be worth in town. Yeah. And so that's the kind of tenant I'm looking for anyways, right? That maybe wants to spend a little bit more and feel proud of the place that they live in, so they treat it like their own, right?
What are the key metrics you look for that kind of pushes you to get those premium pricing? So you mentioned laundry is one of them, right?
Always separate laundry in each unit. We always separate hydro. So electrical, so each unit has its own electrical panel. They have their own meter. So they put the hydro in their own name. They pay it for their own usage. I don't separate the other stuff like gas and water.
Yep.
That's a little more difficult. Not many people do that. Once in a while, you'll see an investor that's doing that now. I haven't. I mean, I'd like to try that sometime, because if you can separate the HVAC system, like the heating and cooling systems, I mean, then you'd reduce a big source of noise transfer between units with getting rid of the ducts that are connected between the floors.
That's right.
That's all I split, actually. I know some investors now are splitting the yards a little bit, which I think is a cool idea. I have not done that yet. I might do that though, so that you can give each tenant like a private section of the backyard. So run a separate fence right down the center or something like that. Right. So maybe I'll do that at some point. So far I haven't. For me, I always just set the expectation up front that the common area outside the home, like the driveway, the front yard, the backyard, that's shared space. So you're going to share that with your upstairs neighbor, your downstairs neighbor. So be respectful. And it works. It works. So.
Yeah, and then for the water and gas, I guess, do you charge those also? How do you separate that, or how do you split that between the levels, or is that something that is covered by you?
So no, I don't pay for it. Well, I shouldn't. So I keep it in my name. So I do pay for it directly.
That's right.
But I split it back to the tenant. So the main floor gets 60% of the cost of that. The lower floor gets 40% of the cost.
Right.
And that seems to be a fair way. And what I actually have tended to do is, originally I would get those bills, right? And then I would then go back to the tenants, and every month I would have to charge them, right? 60% of, hey, the total for the month for the gas and the water was $280 or whatever. So you owe me this much, you owe me that much. That didn't make sense to me eventually, because that's a lot of work. Yeah. So what I've done now is, the last couple of years, I just put this on autopilot, where I just always set my tenants' expectation when they're moving in, that for the whole house, I estimate that the cost of the gas and the water is probably going to be about $260. Okay, that's the number I generally use for the city of Welland, because I have got some data now to back me up that like the track record. Yep. And so what I will then say to the upstairs tenant is, you're going to pay me 60% of that every month. Mm-hmm. So 100, I think that works out to 155 or something like that bucks that they put on to their they add to their rent each and every month. Okay. And the downstairs pays like $100 on top of their rent. Right. So in the tenant's mind, their rent now is actually the cost of the rent plus that little utility component. They just send it to me together at one time, right? That's now the cost of the rent. Right. But it is separate per the lease. And that to me is important, because if I do need to adjust, like if they're using way more water than they should be, well, then I can quite easily go back to them and say, I need to reconcile that utility component that you're paying me. And we're going to up that now. Instead of $100 a month extra on your rent, it's going to be $130 a month or something like that, right?
Right.
So far, I haven't had to, and so far my estimates have been pretty close, right? So
Yeah.
I do it as I do a rolling average. I look at it 12 months, and every few months I do reconcile. So I look at, okay, what are the actual bills coming in at? What am I collecting from the tenants for the utilities? I'm within like 10, 20, 30 bucks. It's a wash at that point, right? I don't worry too much about it. And the tenant, I often just explain it to them as like, this is equal billing, right? I'm just going to charge you an equal amount every month. You pay your own hydro, but gas and water, you're going to pay it to me. It's going to be this much. I'm going to reconcile it. I always set the expectations that if you're using more or if you're using less, I'm going to adjust that amount for you. So, and it works.
No, that's awesome. That's great to know, because that was a couple of things that I was wondering as well, because you can't necessarily, it's hard to separate the water, especially from the city. You can, right? I mean, you could, but it's too much cost to even bother with it.
You can do a separate meter, I think, in the house for water. People are starting to do that. I've never looked into the cost to do it, so I don't know. I mean, it's like it's easy to do it this way, right? It works this way. I know a lot of investors set their rents to be inclusive of gas and water.
Yeah.
So they're a little bit higher on the price of the rent, and then they just say, here the cost of this rental is $1,500 a month plus hydro. So I tend to set my price sometimes a little lower, but I say it's plus all utilities, so that they know they're going to pay for everything. Yeah.
And I like that. And the reason why I'm agree with you on that, Scott, is because then you stop people from going crazy and turning the AC a full blast in summer days, or washing the car in the driveway because they're like, oh, it's all inclusive. I can just spend as much as I want and use as much as I want, right? And I've heard a lot of horror stories where now they're kind of accountable, so they're going to think twice. Oh, wait, hold on. Maybe I should just use it to a reasonable amount and not go overspill.
Yeah. Or I've heard the horror stories of some neighbor needs their pool filled, so they just run a hose from my house, hose over to the neighbor's pool, and they run the tap for 3 days to fill up a swimming pool.
There you go.
Because it's all inclusive water. Why not? So no, I don't like that either.
Same thing with laundry. I've heard stories where friends of friends bring, they dump all their laundry, bring it all in the friend's house, and they do everything there because they're like, it's just gas, or sorry, it's just hydro. Pay me to their friends. Yeah, water's included. I don't really care. So you got to run into those issues as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You do have to stay on top of it, right? So you want to look for the inconsistencies. So most investors have a spreadsheet and they just kind of plug in the numbers as the bills come in, and then if something looks like it's skewing in the wrong direction or even the right direction, like they're using less than usual, well, that's a good thing. But you want to know that, right? You want to be always aware of what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So talk to me a little bit about it. What's your portfolio look like currently, Scott? I know you had a bunch that you sold. How many are you holding currently?
I'm not one of these guys that has 68 units or something like that. I don't have all that many. I'm right now holding about 10 properties, maybe a little more, because I have several that I'm working on that are being flipped. So I'm not sure we count flips, but the rentals I have about 20 doors right now. And I did sell a couple over the last year. So I've got about 20 doors right now. And adding more though. So I just bought a off market in Belleville that I'm taking on. And so always kind of looking to do more, right? And so what I did through the last several months is I did a little bit of a portfolio cleanup too, right? So I got rid of one of my rentals, was the only one I had in my portfolio that was not legal. So I had one duplex with a family living upstairs and then 3 students living downstairs that were paying by the room. Okay. So that was a property I bought I bought it on a bit of a whim, to be honest with you. And it was in Hamilton, really nice house, but it just didn't fit my model. And I struggled looking for ways to optimize it, to legalize it, and I just couldn't make the math work on it. So I just opted during this crazy seller's market we've been in to unload it, and so I did. So redeploy the cash into something else, and so that's been kind of what I've been doing. So yeah, and then I've got a couple of different projects that on the go that are that we're flipping as well. So it's confusing sometimes to think about how many properties you've got, because like there's some that you're working on that are like 6 months long that you're renovating, and then there's at the end of the project we're actually just going to sell it, right? So I'm not going to rent it unless I can't sell it. Then I do have to rent it. It's always that you always have to have those multiple exit strategies. So.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get into as well. And I love that you're actively doing stuff on the side. It's not just buy and hold, because buy and hold, as you know, it takes a long time, right, to recoup your money. Unless you're making good cash flow, it's going to take a little bit of time, right? So talk to me a little bit about how you were able to basically work it out that you can quit first of all your job, and secondly, you are now on an active stream of income through real estate.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of started plotting that out, I would say in 2017, 2018 is when I kind of got serious about, creating cash flow, right? Enough cash flow that would eventually replace my income and become my primary source of income. So that's what I did. And I mean, so I think, so yeah, here's the thing, right? So a lot of people talk about, I'm going to quit and I'm 28, and that's one thing to do that when you've got you're earning an income and maybe you're single, you don't have a family to support.
Yeah.
I quit. So I'm a little bit older than you are. I quit when I was 47. So and I started investing when I was 40. So I was a late bloomer.
Right.
So and I was pretty senior in the software companies that I worked in for a number of years, and earning a really good salary and bonuses galore and whatever else. So it's hard when you get to that point to look for, how am I going to replace that income with income I'm earning through investments. So you have to kind of rewire your brain a little bit to not think of it that I need to replace dollar for dollar in investing income. I need to replace it dollar for dollar, because that's a lot harder, and I didn't do it that way.
Right.
What I did is I looked at, okay, what am I taking home every month from my job? And when I say taking home, I mean net of all of the, I was socking away money into every investment opportunity that the company would allow us to do, right? So stock, putting money into stocks because the company matches, putting money into RSPs because the company matches, all that stuff. And so I ratcheted up all those kinds of deductions off of my pay, so that what I was taking home every month was a heck of a lot less than I would have been earning otherwise. To train myself to, I'm going to live off of a smaller amount, right?
Right.
And I didn't always do it that way, but I did that for the last number of years to really kind of, get my finances just a little bit more tuned in, let's say.
Okay.
So I started doing that. So getting really, really clear on what am I living off of from a net income perspective. At the same time, I was looking at expenses. So where can I reduce some expenses? Right. So do I really need to have, 2 car payments and whatever else, right? So how can I start to cut back some of the big ticket expenses? And it comes down to getting really good clarity on, what do you need? What do you need to live on, right? So if you don't have an extravagant lifestyle, you probably need less than you think.
Yeah.
So I looked at it that way. So what's my net income coming in that I actually need to live off of, and how do I replace that number?
Right.
I don't need to replace the monster salary plus bonus plus all that kind of stuff that you're earning on paper, because that's a heck of a lot harder. Like when I used to get my my T4 at the end of the year, I'm like, oh, holy crap, I made that much money, because the companies always put your salary, all the little perks and bonuses they tax you on shows up on your box, whatever it's called, your T4, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, how could I be making this much money? It just seems crazy to me, right?
Right.
But if you're just thinking about, I got to solve for replacing that income, I mean, that's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, and by the way, I'm not advocating for people should go quit their jobs. But when you get to a certain point in your life, like sometimes that might make sense, right? Like,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I was kind of at the point where I was already spending more and more of my time kind of on my side hustle, investing,
Yeah.
and it was consuming more of my time, more of my mind share. And so I had to I had to either, commit to one or the other, right? I think is kind of where I was going with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when it became clear to me on what number I needed to live off of, then I was always spreadsheeting this out, right? So every property I added, boom, I added just a little bit more cash flow, right?
Yep. Yep.
A little bit more cash flow, a little bit more cash flow. And then to supplement that, what I started doing too is a bit of private lending.
Mm-hmm.
So once I kind of got within striking distance, like really close, like I'm now within like, I don't know, I was within like $1,000 of where I wanted to be for monthly cash flow.
Right.
And I knew I could have lived off it just fine.
Yeah.
But I wanted a little bit more. Then I started doing a bit of extra private lending. So I went out and I started lending some extra cash to other investors, right? And returning and getting a nice return every month through an interest payment, which is just extra cash flow to me.
Yeah.
And because as I refinanced a couple properties here and there, I got a couple of payouts, I started lending out some of that money, right? And it's got me to the point where suddenly there was enough cash coming in off of kind of these different streams where I realized I can do this, right? I'm just gonna. I had to wrap my head around it. Like I'm gonna walk away from this, great job that I have, but it was the right thing for me to do. So I did it.
That's awesome. No,
Yes.
it's a challenging thing for sure, especially when you are used to stability. Right? I think the key word is stability, right? It's kind of scary to say, you know what, because when you're an entrepreneur, if you don't work, you're not getting paid. It's as simple as that, right? You don't get vacation days off. You don't get sick days off, right? Like the perks, the benefits, the bonuses that you were talking about, the stock options, right? All those are gone. So was that a collective decision you had to sit with your family and make? I mean, was that something that your wife supported? Is she also part of your whole real estate journey?
Yeah. So the family was supportive. I mean, obviously we I brought them in for the ride, so they were aware of what the plan was and all that. And yeah, so they were well on. Like we were all on the same page. Put it that way. Now, I've told this story on other podcasts. Maybe you heard it, maybe you haven't. But what happened was when I quit. So I gave my notice at work in early March,
right?
And of 2020. So right before COVID became a thing, and gave my notice. And my last day was like March 20th. So I leave. I'm like, all right, this is good. I'm excited, nervous, crazy. What have I done? Walked away from this good job. I'm an idiot, whatever. All those things are going through your head, right? And then literally 2 weeks after that, 3 weeks, April 1st is actually when it happened. April 1st, my wife, who just to back up, my wife was working full time, right?
Okay.
Earning a decent salary. She also working in a software company. Right. And so part of me leaving my job was there was a little bit of a safety blanket there, right? Knowing that, well, she's still earning some money and she's got benefits. So we can still, whatever, get prescription drugs. We can still go to the dentist, whatever. Right? So literally 2 or 3 weeks after I leave my job, she gets a phone call on April 1st from her employer saying, unfortunately, we have to downsize a little bit because COVID's really hit us hard. And we're going to have to let you go. So that was on April 1st, and they gave her 2 weeks notice.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah. So that, and at this point, it's like, all right, I can't go back to my employer because that cord has been cut.
Yeah.
So it was just a little bit of okay, wake up call. Now we got to figure this out.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I hope you were able to get some great golden nuggets out of it. The kindest thing that you can do is share this podcast across all social media to help as many people as possible. If you like this podcast or have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram or YouTube. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next episode. Remember, financial freedom is just a few properties away.